Congressman Gowdy, great to have you back on the program.
Delighted to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Patrick Cunningham, a senior official from the U.S. Attorney's Office, he gets subpoenaed, and then he tells your committee he's going to take the fifth. Your reaction to all of this?
Stunned silence, which is hard to accomplish with a member of Congress, to get them to be silent. I never thought I would see a federal prosecutor take the Fifth Amendment. I've seen it a lot in court. It's usually the defendant that does it. First of all, let's back up. You shouldn't have to subpoena a member of the United States Attorney's Office or an employee of the Department of Justice. You ought to be able to just ask them. Chairman Issa asked him to come. He never would get around to giving us a date, so Chairman Issa sent a subpoena, and then we hear from his attorney that if he comes, he's going to take the Fifth Amendment, which I find to be shocking because there are many questions we can ask him that don't in any way, shape, or form implicate him, starting with his name. We can then ask him what his title is. We can ask him when he learned about Fast and Furious. None of those things put him in legal jeopardy. Mm-hmm. But I can also tell you this. There are certain remedies, if you will, we have at our disposal. But anyone who thought that Fast and Furious was just an exercise in political vendettas, when you have the criminal chief in Arizona taking the Fifth Amendment before a committee in Congress, this is serious. And I think it validates all of us who were concerned with this for almost a year now.
Yeah, I mean, doesn't this create even more suspicion? I mean, here his attorney says he didn't do anything wrong, that the information that Cunningham gave the DOJ wasn't even included in that now infamous February 4th letter. So why not answer the questions?
That's a great question. If you've done nothing wrong, and then you would think that somebody would be in a hurry to come tell us that. Look, I get the fact that everyone, actually, you don't have a right not to talk. You have a right not to incriminate yourself. How far Chairman Issa wants to push that, we'll see. But there are certain questions, the answer to which doesn't implicate anyone. So the notion that you have a Fifth Amendment right to talk is inaccurate. You have a Fifth Amendment right not to incriminate yourself, which then leads to the next question. Well, why are you worrying about incriminating yourself if you've done nothing wrong?
Absolutely.
But I think what's happening is the Department of Justice, who authored that demonstrably false letter, now is seeking a scapegoat, and perhaps they see a viable scapegoat in Arizona. But how are we ever going to get answers to legitimate questions, I hasten to add? How are we going to get answers if people start invoking their Fifth Amendment? I mean, stop and think about this for a second. Federal prosecutors invoking their Fifth Amendment right not to incriminate themselves. That was my fear all along, was that people are going to lose confidence in the Department of Justice, the United States Attorney's Office, law enforcement in general, and here we have a prosecutor invoking his right. I'm stunned silence. I know you can't believe that because I've been talking for 5 minutes, but it was stunning when I heard that.
I know, and I think everybody had the same reaction. As you were saying, here he is, a member of the Department of Justice. He's a prosecutor, and he's going to take the Fifth. But you think they might be setting up as the fall guy? Because my question was, do you think that this is pressure from the DOJ and the administration saying, hey, don't do this, don't testify, don't talk to him?
Well, that pressure only works if you're on the same sheet of music. And when you begin to perceive yourself as being set up to take a fall, then I would start looking around for a new batch of friends. Mm-hmm. If he's looking for the Department of Justice to cover him, he needs to look for a new batch of friends. They're not going to. They're primarily concerned with covering for themselves. We do have the Attorney General coming back on February the 2nd. Hopefully he will not invoke his Fifth Amendment right not to incriminate himself, although we might as well because we don't ever seem to get any information.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. What else more is he going to tell you?
Well, we're waiting on the Inspector General's report, which is closing in on the 1-year anniversary. There have been continents that have shifted in less time than it's taken the IG to ask some pretty simple questions. Who knew what when about Fast and Furious? So I don't know if they thought they could slow walk this thing and we'd move on to other lines of inquiry. But here we sit, almost the 1 year anniversary. We're not going anywhere. We're going to continue to take depositions and bring people before Congress, including the Attorney General. You know, initially he said he wasn't coming back, but he is.
Yeah.
And, you know, we can't make, well, you actually can make somebody talk. It involves transactional and use immunity and a whole bunch of other things that bore most people to death. But there are avenues in which you can make people talk, and whether or not the chairman's interested in pursuing those will ultimately be up to him.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because Cunningham worked directly under the now former U.S. Attorney for Arizona, Dennis Burke. Burke has resigned. Cunningham has turned in his resignation effective January 27th.
Well, and if I'm not mistaken, I think the former United States Attorney also had a professional relationship with our Secretary of Homeland Security, Janet Napolitano, who also has said she knows absolutely nothing about Fast and Furious, which strains credibility. The more they obfuscate and hide and don't answer our questions, you know, I was being interviewed by Greta Van Susteren, who I believe it was on air, said initially she wasn't sure if there was anything too Fast and Furious. But the more they delay and obfuscate and don't give us answers to what are legitimate questions, I would think all reasonable people would wonder what is going on in the Department of Justice and the U.S. Attorney's Office. You know, I can't help but laugh. They use subpoenas and a whole host of other things to unlock this mystery that United States attorneys are fired or asked to leave after presidential elections. I think we all remember that so-called scandal with the U.S. attorneys. This is a legitimate scandal, and we're going to stay with it.
Yeah, and all the Terrys are asking for, Brian Terry's family, is the truth. And as you said, one hearing after another, they keep dodging, stonewalling. I mean, what's it going to take, do you think, Congressman, to get to the truth?
Documents, proof, evidence. You know, testimony is one form of evidence, but what I'm really
special prosecutor?
Pardon me?
Special prosecutor?
Well, yeah, no, you know what I mean? A special prosecutor may or may not have any more investigatory techniques than we have. I mean, you have the grand jury, but we have subpoena power as well. We've asked the Attorney General for his emails. He says he's not going to give them to us. We'll get another document dump, you know, the Friday afternoon before he testifies. But the answer is going to be in the documents, the emails, memos back and forth, telephone records. We're not going to get anybody to say anything. After a year, they've rehearsed and gone over their testimony too much. But documents and emails don't lie. So hopefully, if we stick with it, which we will find documentary evidence of who knew what when, and there will be the three things I've always wanted, and I don't want anything more than this. I want answers. I want someone to accept responsibility, and then I want there to be accountability. And I don't want somebody to be set up as the fall person just to protect the higher up.
Yeah.
I can't stand that.
I know. And let me ask you this. Tomorrow, Cunningham shows up for his deposition. And as you said, he plans to give you his name and his title. Will you still ask him questions, though, at that deposition?
Well, the OGR staff, the attorneys on OGR staff will be the ones asking the questions.
Okay.
My guess is they will get to a question that he thinks puts him in some legal jeopardy, and he will invoke his Fifth Amendment right. And, I mean, you can continue to ask if you want.
Yeah.
There's a line of cases that you cannot continue to question someone when you know the answer is going to be that they invoke their right. But that's usually in front of a jury, and there's no jury in a deposition. But, you know, you also, I mean, what's the use in continuing to ask the same question if you get the same answer? The other question is whether or not there's going to be any discussion of use or transactional immunity, because when you grant that to someone, then they're no longer in jeopardy, and they don't have any choice but to answer your questions, and if they don't, then they face possible contempt. So you cannot indefinitely fail to answer questions if your prospects of being put in legal jeopardy are removed. So I'm not suggesting that's what's going to happen, or I'm not even suggesting it's what ought to happen. You don't want to give immunity to someone until you know what they've done.
Yeah.
But there are remedies and avenues at our disposal to get answers, even from people who think they don't want to give them to us.
Yeah. Any indication when you might be getting that Inspector General's report?
Hopefully in my lifetime. I think we're going to give her perhaps until the 1-year anniversary, which is in about a month. And after that, my suspicion is that Chairman Ice and Chairman Smith are going to start asking her, what's taking so long. There have been, countries formed in less time than it's taken her to ask questions that you and I could ask in 30 minutes. So it's beginning to look. The objectivity of the investigation is going to be compromised if it hasn't already been. The longer she waits, it's been a year. I mean, heavens knows. You can ask. You can write. I mean, I'm sure Dr. Zhivago and Crime and Punishment were written in less than a year. I don't think she needs much longer to conclude her report. But as soon as I tell her to hurry up, then she'll claim that we rushed her.
Yeah.
And so we've got to be cognizant of that, too.
All righty. Well, thanks for taking the time. I know it's getting busy up there, and we'll see what happens tomorrow and then see what happens when Holder returns in February.
Let me promise you we're not going anywhere. So
all righty.
We're not losing interest.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.